Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to have here Jessica Joy London, who goes by Joy. So that's what I'll be referring to her as when we're talking. I have loved getting to know Joy over the past little while here. I ran into her, or I first came in contact with you, Joy, like years ago at an art festival at the Crane Art Building in Philly, and I bought like a little oval piece from you. You probably do not even remember this, but I bought a
I know
little,
the piece.
uh-huh. I bought a little oval piece from you, and it sits like up in my like living area. And that was my first encounter with you. And I was like, this person is doing some really like interesting stuff. And then over the course of time, I've kind of followed along with your career and your studio and your teaching. And I'm just so excited that you're here to hang out with me and the listeners uh, today. But before we get into our conversation and why you're here, can you just give us an idea of who you are and what kind of stuff you put out in the world?
Sure. So I have an MFA, and which you don't need to be creative, by the way, but I didn't believe in myself. So I thought that that would help me do that. So anyway, after my MFA, I showed in museums and galleries, gave like museum talks, and was like kicking butt and doing awesome with my art. And then I moved to Philadelphia with a new baby and had to start over again completely and
Right.
could not get foothold in the gallery world here. So I sort of dug deep and realized that I really wanted to make art accessible to people, and that's what I've been doing since I was a little kid. So I explored many different ways to make art accessible via, like, I was painting on scarves, I was making jewelry, I was in the fashion incubator in Philly, and
Nice.
I realized that the best way to make art accessible is to help people create it themselves. So I started Project Joy Studio in 2017, and I have been running workshops and creating art kits since then, and they've come a long way. And I feel like 5 years later, I'm just now like really like feeling like good movement with my business, and
That's awesome.
I'm transitioning back over into like finding a good balance between my business and my own creative work.
hmm that's an interesting thing to even talk about. How do we find balance in our creative life? You know, as an artist with your own vision and your own body of work, while simultaneously a lot of the time helping other people discover their creativity and identify their vision and their process, right?
Right.
And so that word process is something that I want to spend some time with you on, because I think all of us as artists, whether we're visual artists or musicians or actors, writers, whatever, right? We all have a process that we have either been brought into or have cultivated ourselves through our journey of making. And your process, as I've been learning, has gone from something that was more, gosh, like academic and,
Traditional.
traditional, great word, perfect. Traditional, right, to super experimental, right? And super like, just organic and flowy.
Mhm.
And I think that that is something that, you have a really kind of personal story about. But I think what I want to do and what I'd love to do and what I think people crave is to know that they don't have to remain in a particular, box, right? If they're feeling frustrated or resistance when they're making, maybe they're not working in the right lane. Maybe they haven't found their process flow yet.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so can you talk a little bit about your
Ab-
journey into finding your process, and then we can go from there. I think that's a good
yeah,
place to start.
absolutely. So when I was in undergrad, I, took the classes that you take in art school. I took painting classes, I took life drawing classes, I took like electronic media classes. And in these classes, you're given assignments, right? They tell you what to make, what materials to use. And you grow up. The most accessible art that I find is paintings and drawings. So that's what you think art is, and it's the first place you go, but it's not where you need to stay. And so I found that when I was in undergrad, I was doing these paintings. I mean, I had my work in the Smithsonian and all over the place, but it took me so long to make that work.
Uh-huh.
And not that that's a bad thing, but for me, I like was beating myself up about it. um and I just like didn't feel like I was in a flow. I found that I didn't want to know what I was going to make before I made it, because then I felt like a technician and not an explorer. you
Right.
know like I want to be surprised. I want to discover something new when I sit down and make work. I don't want to have the end result in front of me and be having to discipline myself to sit down and make that a reality. I want to discover something beyond what I can like already imagine in my head. So I think that's what we're all craving. We're all craving like surprise. We love opening up presents that we don't know what's inside. And if you can think about like your art process and sitting down and creating as like a present you're giving yourself, but you don't know what it's going to be, I think there's a natural curiosity that is actually energy that drives you to create. And that is like where like the power of art lies for me. Could
Mm-hmm.
be different for other people, but I think letting go of this expectation of what the art should look like and just sitting down and seeing what happens is
Sure.
really, really powerful. And so in grad school, I came up with this kind of crazy idea. And,
Okay.
a lot of us sort of bring in elements from memories, right, from our childhood. And I just happened to spend a lot of time in the hospital as a kid. But so I thought of the idea of taking an IV bag, putting ink in it, and letting it drip on top of Yupo paper in the shower. And it
Nice.
was like there's thousands of ideas passing through my head
Right.
at any given
Yeah.
moment, as like with many artists. But this idea like was so weird that I was like, I gotta try this.
Right. You just
And
couldn't pull away from that idea. You couldn't get it out of your head. You were like,
I-
I have to just let
yes,
this thing play out and
exactly.
see what
And
happens.
no matter how crazy it sounds, right? Like,
Mhm.
and honestly, that's where the best ideas lie, in the crazy ones.
Yeah.
So I did it. And the next morning, I checked on this piece of art, and it looked like a photograph of the surface of Mars. It wasn't pretty, but it was more photographic than anything I had ever done. And I had been selling, photorealistic portraits in high school. So I
Right.
was like,
You're
all
like
right,
mind blown at that moment. Like,
absolutely.
what did I just stumble across here? Like, this is
Exactly.
exciting for me.
Exactly. So, but here's where the roadblocks start to come in. Like you discover this new thing, and then you're like, okay, well, how, like, where do we go from here? How do I push this forward? And so I got more of those materials and tried to think about like how I would continue on, and all of the like weight of the decisions that we have to make before we start a piece of art just came tumbling down on me.
So,
And I
like,
was
the
like,
stuff that they were just saying, like, made the process so long and so slow, all of
right,
a sudden showed up in this new
right.
exciting discovery place that you landed. And I can imagine you're going, oh my gosh, no, not this thing again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, well, what colors am I going to use? Like, I don't want to use the same colors again. Like, I want to discover a new color palette. So, what I did was I lined up all of my art in a grid and gave it numbers and
Mm.
it rolled the die to tell me which color I was going to use. But as I put each individual variable into like a system, into this system, a new like decision would then, a new invisible decision would then become visible to me.
Yeah.
I would say, well, how many colors? Well, wait, how much water do I, because I was working with a lot of ink. So I was like, how much
Hmm.
water do I add to this ink?
Right.
And then Like what do I apply it to the paper with a brush, with a bottle, with a pipette? Like, so there were so many invisible things that I was doing all
All
the
these
time
variables, right?
that were weighing on me that I didn't even realize were weighing on me. And I just kept putting it into the system. And before I knew it, I had like a formula that was like 10 steps long. And I would write it in a logbook. I'm like, part artist, part like mad scientist. And I would then, and I rolled out a 10-foot by 10-foot piece of Yupo paper in the common area of my grad studio. And I would walk to the coordinates that I rolled the dice to figure out where I was going to enact this formula. And
Hmm.
I basically ended up doing like performances. I mean, not intentionally, but it's what I was doing.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
And so,
It was this like dance almost of, working through this process and moving through it. Um,
exactly.
each time each time it became necessary to make the next move. I'm hearing this, you're coming from this place where you were feeling like a technician, right? You were feeling like someone who, was just not finding, passion or joy in the making. It was taking a really long time.
Right.
um, and then you had this kind of revelation or this idea, where you just couldn't get it out of your mind, right? You had to just let it drip, literally. And then you
Mhm.
and then what I'm hearing you say is, well, then all of that stuff that was heavy on me from previous making came back. And now I have to try and figure out a way to, you know, structure it so
Right.
that I can continue to feel freedom in the making,
Right. Right.
right?
To stay in this space of like play, right? Because as soon as you go from, the initial thing that I did with the IV bag was a space of play and experimentation. But then, you're in grad school or you need to make work now. And it's how do you stay in this space of play
Yeah,
while, hitting these deadlines, or while, being consistent and showing up in your creative practice consistently.
yeah,
And essentially, I gamified the creative process for myself. So I went from like making maybe one painting in 6 months to making, well, let's just say that I made probably about 200 paintings in 9 months.
okay. So
And
yeah,
I'm
you
not
really, and you're not what?
over exaggerating.
Over exaggerating. Yeah. I bet you're not, because you just freed yourself up, right? You just opened yourself up. Wow, so it was almost like you were gamifying your whole process, right? Taking something that felt really like organic and ambiguous, right? And bringing it into something that you can kind of, manage within the structure that you needed to manage it within.
Yes, yeah. Gamifying the process totally changed everything for me. I was showing up with energy that I didn't have before in my creative process, and I was able to, make changes like over time, and I discovered so many other possibilities by doing this. So that's really what gamifying does, is and anybody can start that way. Or, if you don't want that to be your whole creative process, that's like totally legit. But it's a great way to start if you're feeling stuck.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I would say is like, with whatever art supplies you have, just give them a number
Yeah.
and then do a random number generator and say and generate it for how many art supplies you're going to use and then which ones. So if you generate the number 6, then do it 6 more times to tell you
Uh-huh.
which numbers of the things to use, and then just grab those art supplies and just see what happens. Like
See
just
what
see what you can make with those random combinations, and it'll get your creative juices flowing and help you, find
that's
new things.
That's awesome. I was trained as when I went to art school. I wasn't trained. I didn't go through a painting program. I actually went through a design program.
Mhm.
And so I'm trained as a designer initially. And design, right, is at least the way I took my training and understanding is, you need to have confines, right? You need to have boundaries. You need to have a set of
Condition.
conditions, right? In order to organize your composition and convey or communicate your message. If you don't have conditions and all you have are like tons of variables, um, it's going to like one probably be pretty overwhelming as the designer or artist, but it's also going to create a piece of communication or storytelling that isn't super like gelled together. And so
Right.
that's why they're like foundational design principles to start from. And that is true. Those design principles carry out or carry through all of the visual arts, whether that's
Mhm.
painting or sculpture or design, right? And so I like what you're saying is like set some conditions up, right? That will give you the freedom then to play, to explore, to expand. Conditions and boundaries or guardrails, so to speak, aren't actually limiting at the end of the day,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you and I were talking, and we were saying that oftentimes people believe that they're either creative or not creative. Like it's this like black and white thing. Or, they believe that, they are only this, and so they can't expand into that, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I know that your philosophy, right, of creativity stems from a place of playfulness and a place of exploration. And so I wonder
Hmm.
what you say to those people who believe that, yes, I am, or no, I'm not, right? Or I do this, so I can't do that. How do you get them to like have a mental shift so that they can maybe explode in an area that they never thought possible for themselves?
So when I run workshops, I, meet a lot of people who are creative and then bring their analytical friends along. And I've had so many conversations with them, and a lot of them are like, I would like to be creative, but I don't even know what I would make, or I don't have time to like master those skills. And what I've done is my process, it allows you to create something from your curiosity rather than
Mm,
from your skill sets. And so I say, and I have this on my kits too, is if you can spill milk, you can create a beautiful piece of art.
I love
And what
that.
I'm really saying is if you can let go and be okay with like making a mess and not worrying about the outcome, then you can make a beautiful piece of art, right?
Mm.
Because when we spill something or our kids spill something, we're like, oh,
Right.
but
Hmm.
maybe the next time your kids spill some milk, maybe you can help them make it into like a funny shaped puddle, or like make this puddle into a bunny or something like that. I don't know. I
Yeah.
haven't
Let
even
go of
gotten
that
there
frustration, right? Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. Let
But
go of that immediate frustration or that immediate like reactivity to like this is
judgment.
yeah, judgment, that is huge. I even heard you talking about that creeping into your new process when you discovered it, right? All of those things, like all these
Right.
decisions, all of these things, and conditions that you weren't looking at as friendly conditions, but like weight. You had to work at letting that fall away, right?
Yeah. I mean,
That's a normal
I
thing.
right. And that leads me to something like really important. Like I created this process for myself because I really needed it. I grew up in like a really like horrible situation. And when you grow up like in an abusive situation, like
Mm,
you want to control everything to keep yourself
yeah,
safe.
yeah.
So I think like what I needed to learn time and time again was to let go. So that's another reason why I think that I found this process. So with that being said, like I would encourage you to think about when designing a process for yourself, think about what do I need? So for instance, I'll give you another example. A few years ago, I noticed that I had a really hard time like getting outside and moving my body outside. And I, because I'm a studio body and a home
Yeah.
body.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, okay, like what can I do to get myself to move around outside? What creative process can I create? So I created a series called Walking Meditations where
Hmm.
I would walk around my neighborhoods and around my studio neighborhoods and other neighborhoods eventually and collect materials wherever I was. So leaves, flowers, I would just notice where I was, and I collected trash and just anything that was around me that I thought would make interesting artifacts in my ink process. And I would bring them back to the studio after my walk and create paintings with them. And the paintings are so were it was so cathartic and so therapeutic to feel good about myself because I was doing something that was really hard for me to do.
Hmm.
And for me, an art process is the best carrot ever. So, if you need to work out, if you need to drink more water, if you want to drink more tea, like what can you do to design an art process around that need that you have?
Huh. Wow, that's really interesting. I've never actually thought about utilizing art practice to spill into other areas of your life to help you along, to move you forward and propel your life. That's
And
really,
I
go ahead.
Yeah, it's exciting. I just think that that's a way, like I know like in my grad program, they were very big into like getting outside the art bubble.
Hmm.
So I had to take classes like in other grad programs. So I was in like the School of Social Work and I was in like the School of Public Health and I was in a biomed lab for like a couple of years and which helped me like gain a process based like approach like operations and stuff like that. And so I think what makes an artist's work really amazing is when it integrates, your experiences and your life and your vulnerabilities into it. And so, like, specifically vulnerabilities, when you see like a powerful art show about like something vulnerable that an artist went
Yeah.
through, it is so powerful and it's like it connects you and it, humanizes things. And so I think a great question to start with is what do I need?
What do I need?
And what do I need? And how can I create a process or like to help me do for myself what I need or
Hmm.
get for myself what I need? Because what you need is usually like around, based around some sort of, vulnerability, right? Or
Right.
something that you're not happy with. Um,
Right. I'm
so
either
yeah,
trying to
art,
like get a need met or protect myself, right, in some way. When we have these vulnerabilities show up, it's usually around those things. You're right. And so asking
or
yourself, what do I need? How can I how can I take care of myself and how do I do that is a really great set of questions to ponder both in life, right, and in the studio.
exactly. And it's also about healing, right? So like how can you use art and design a process to help you heal? And again, what do I need? I think is a great way to help you find like what you need to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's so many different reasons, or I know that there's so many different reasons why artists, people create and make things. But I truly believe that all of those kind of, higher level reasons to make and to be creative are are at their core, about, you know, learning more about oneself, understanding
Right.
the human experience,
Right.
coming in contact with one's humanness in ways that, especially now in today's world, we don't have many opportunities to touch. And so l- oftentimes when people are thinking, I'm not creative, right? I'm not like I can't be an artist. They're thinking in their mind that they need to, you know, do those photorealistic
Exactly.
renderings, right?
Right.
Or they need to, you know, create something that will, oh, I will never be able to get something in a museum, right? I No gallerist is going to pick me up and want to show my work and sell it. That's really not, that's all made up stuff, right? It's great.
Exactly.
It's great if that is what you want and that's a goal and you can pursue that goal and you'll get there. But at its base, human beings, or at our base, at our core, human beings are creative beings. And through creativity, through making, through using our hands, through tactile means, through
Mhm.
engaging with our body, which I love that project that you did to get yourself moving, and
Oh,
getting out there in the world through using and engaging our body. That's how we find healing,
yeah.
right? That's how we find health, right? It's not this cognitive exercise, and I love that that's where you bring in to your studio and run your workshops. You got these creative people coming in, but they're like dragging along their analytical friends who are like stuck up in their head, right? And then all of a sudden you're helping them drop down from their head into their body just by, right, what, spilling something maybe initially,
No,
right?
exactly. When I run a workshop, I have them do three pieces because I don't want them to feel like, oh, this one has to be good, you know. So
Right.
I'm constantly like figuring out ways to like take the pressure off. So and then I give them two instructions to start the first two paintings just to help initiate them into a space of play. And it works every time. As soon as they do the first drop and see what happens, they complete like their inner child comes out instantaneously.
That's
And
awesome.
I've
What
only
it
had one person in 5 years have a hard time
really?
getting like out of their head. And they
Wow.
were a very, very, very detail oriented artist who did very geometric like detail. Their work is beautiful,
Uh-huh.
but
Sure.
totally opposite of this process. So I think everybody can get into that sense of play. It's just a matter of knowing how, right? Like if we don't know it's a possibility, then we
Right.
don't know to do it.
Right. They
So,
need to be, we need to be led to something, you know, if especially something that's so new and out of the box for us. Because, you know, we're also we're also pretty habitual creatures, right?
right,
Who like to find something and stick with it even if it like isn't working sometimes for us. So we have to
right,
kind of be led to and given permission, right, to just play.
right,
One of the things that I
right.
do upstairs in my studio, um, to kind of help myself along, and I know some other people who do this as well, because it can be paralyzing to stand or sit in front of like a perfect or seemingly perfect, pristine like canvas or paper,
Right.
right? So like I will, you know, purposely like drop it on the floor or something, or you know, allow my one of my, well, now I have two sons, but for a while it was just one, like allow my one of my kids to like make a mark on it,
Love
um
that.
something to shift me from this like, this is an expensive piece of
Exactly.
material, and oh my gosh, I'm going to like, there's so much pressure on me to like do it right, to make it something good. But if I somehow deface it or make it like not so perfect, all of a
Right.
sudden that like releases some of that tension, right? Because it's not this like beautiful piece of white thing
Right.
any longer. So that's one way that I kind of allow myself to be free from some of that, you know,
Pressure. Yeah.
pressure. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. Before I found the process that I use now, I used to do something sort of similar. I used to close my eyes and be like,
Yeah.
and then open them and then respond to that
And then
mark.
respond to them, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because honestly, like that, I mean, that's what my work is about, is, a call and response, almost a conversation between, you know, me and the elements that I'm using, the paint that I'm pushing around, right? And it becomes just basically, that like respond to that mark that you just made, right? Take that away, put that back down, right? But before I can get there, it's just like this like expanse of blankness, and it's like I can't move there. It's like controlling me. So
Right. I think that that blankness is like is a representation of like all of the possibilities. Like when it's blank, literally you could make anything appear on that paper.
yeah,
And as soon as the more you do, the more it, whittles it down,
right.
and the less pressure you feel.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I was just upstairs in my studio yesterday, and I hadn't been up there in a while because the way I work, people who are listening have probably heard me talk about this before, but the way I work is like in fits and starts, right? I
Mhm.
will like have this like massive like explosion of quote unquote productivity in the studio, where I'll just be painting every day. I'll like be up and down multiple times a day, right? By the way, it probably has something to do with my own personal like mental health diagnosis, parentheses, right? Like I have like really like impulsive moments, and then like very slow and kind of like dead moments, right? And so I haven't been up there in a while, but I went up there anyway yesterday for the first time in a while, and I had left on the wall um like I think it's like 4 feet square or something, from a few weeks ago or the other month. I came back to it, and I remember leaving it initially. I was like, okay, so this piece is probably done, um but I don't know. And then like I fell off, and then I went back upstairs and it was still there, and I was like, no, I don't think it's done. And then like I went and I just like added stuff to it, and I was like, shit, like I just like ruined this thing, and all of this judgment came came
Oh,
came back on me, and I'm like, I just ruined it. But what I know about me and my process is that when I do that, when I go and I like make a when I go but what I know about me and my process is that when I do that kind of thing, when I go up there and I like make what I in the moment would deem to be a mistake, my process is I need to go away. I need to go away from that, and then I need to come back with fresh eyes, and then I know that I can then have another conversation with that painting, right? Because I don't ever believe really that you can, especially in the way that you and I create, we're very different in our process, but I think similar in our mindset. I don't really believe that you can ruin a piece of work, really, right? It might not be what you think or envision it to be, right? But for me, it's a conversation, and these works are their own thing anyway.
exactly. Yeah, it's sort of an artifact of the conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I love that. I think that, you know, stepping away is like really important. I think it's completely like unrealistic to think that you will be working on the same piece like day after day after day.
right,
Um, one of the a couple of other things that I have set up for myself to help me not deal with the judgment of not working enough on something is to always work on multiple pieces at a time, because then you can, when you get stuck on one, you go to another one, and
Yep.
you're like unconsciously working out what needs to happen on where you were stuck. And then the work is more cohesive because you're working on it at the same time. And then you don't feel that preciousness of that one
Hmm.
piece. So
Yeah.
you can let go
Yeah.
of
Well, that's
that
exactly
piece,
like
for
what you,
example.
yeah, and that's exactly what you do with your workshop participants, right? You say, okay, we're going to make
Exactly.
three things. You're going to make three things because
Exactly.
you need to have the ability to move around, and you also, like you just said, it removes the preciousness of
Exactly.
that of one thing. And so
Right.
we just have a few minutes left, and I want to give you an opportunity, Joy, to talk about um your workshop, your workshops, and your art kits. I know that, and you can tell me if this is no longer true, but I remember when you initially, said you wanted to come and hang out with me on the podcast. You were offering a free virtual workshop with the purchase of any of your kits. Is that still a thing? And if it is, pitch it to us so that people can maybe check that out.
No, absolutely. And the reason why I want to do that is because I know it's hard to try something new. So if you want to try something new, you can buy the kit and I will guide you in starting this new thing.
Nice, nice.
And I'm gonna walk you around my studio for a second.
Oh, sweet.
Here's
Here we go. We got a little tour
here's
going
the
on here.
leftovers from my workshop yesterday. So many cool possibilities and materials that I use, and
Love
puzzles.
that.
When you were at Art for the Cash Poor at the Crane Arts building, that was the beginning of my puzzle
Yeah, I got
thing.
one of those too.
You did?
I got that oval piece, and I also have a little like a little puzzle too,
Oh,
which was
that's
awesome.
so exciting.
Yeah.
So here is my big kit.
Okay,
It's the
nice.
Art and Nature collaboration kit. All you need is curiosity. What is not needed? Experience, paintbrushes, worry, a lot of time, or a creative bone in your body.
I love that. And for people who are listening to the podcast and not seeing us on video, like some other people will, that kit, it looks like it has like some organic material, some like plant material. Is that a canvas or something in there, or some kind of
So
substrate?
you've got 6 round pieces of Yupo paper cut
Okay,
into that are 6-inch circles. You have a wooden panel with a keyhole in the back to easily hang it on your
nice.
wall.
Okay,
So whichever of the 6 pieces you make are your favorite, you can mount it on the wooden panel. And there are
awesome.
instructions, and there's glue, there's a pipette, there's mini prints inside with instructions on the other side. So really there's so much stuff. And the natural materials are super cool,
Yeah,
like the
wow.
skeleton leaves and other cool materials. And
Yeah,
then,
this is really cool, everybody. And what are you showing us here?
so this is one of the paintings from my walking meditation series. And you can see like the garbage that I collected sort of there wrapping
Uh,
around the flower area. But basically, for you guys that can't see, it looks like a very photorealistic painting that I made without using any brushes.
yeah,
So I use natural phenomena like surface tension and other natural phenomena that create the like a ring that you would get on your countertop from your tea or your coffee. It's the same natural phenomena creating the details in your painting.
that is
And then
awesome.
one thing, here's what I used to make before I used brushes, or before I did this process when I used brushes.
Oh, wow. Such a
Yeah. And
difference.
yeah. And the work is obviously beautiful, but
Right.
inside it didn't feel, I didn't have the energy to create this work. So I found something that worked better for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so
So
everybody, this is going to be, I'll link the video to the YouTube channel in the show notes for you so that you can definitely get there. Just like all of the episodes of the Bold Creatives Collective podcast are also on my YouTube channel. So you can always find the video content as well, because especially with this conversation that we're having with Joy, you want to see her studio, you want to see the things that she's making, or the things that she's using to make these beautiful works of art. So Joy, it looks like projectjoystudio.com is your workshops. People can find it there. I'll put the link to get and purchase the kits in the show notes, and then I'll also link over to your own artwork. I'll link them to your site so that
Okay.
they can find that.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I'm really glad that you did give us tons of insight, to be able to free ourselves. If we're artists that make every day, or artists that are just thinking about starting to make, we all can use that encouragement, that permission to let go, right? And to
Right,
be free, and to let ourselves heal through the power of our hands and our
right,
process. So thank you
right.
so much for reminding us of that.
You're welcome. And I'll just leave you with one more thing.
Yeah, please.
Remember that your creative process is yours. You can make it fit you. You can work for 5 minutes a night on something. It's completely up to you. There's no wrong way for you to create art. So don't feel guilty, if what you're doing now
Right.
isn't working.
Right. Well, that is a perfect encouragement to end on. Everybody, this has been the Bold Creatives Collective podcast. Our guest has been Jessica Joy London, and I hope that you're leaving feeling empowered, inspired, and ready to just like burst forth with your creative process. I will talk to you all soon. See you around.